even today, they voted on the budget. And like, we not play games, but vote the way we should be voting. You know, this is, oh, they're not frustrated. You know, that everybody's hammering it, yeah, Dawn would be on the no vote. No, she let him hang alone. It's not a surprise. And so I would be well, I think people wanted her to be something that she wasn't. Yeah, if you looked at, if you go back and look at a lot of her stuff, yes, it's liberal, but I don't know how progressive, except that she is. Yeah, he was like, he has like a good growth up. Yeah. That's not. No, so I think he's done
They mentioned some internal people with kids.
definitely.
That's right, for sure.
And
I'm like, I'm sure police will then call and says he's at 40, he's at 20.
That's right. And we have LA Times, which, you know, they didn't want the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know her.
Tons
Okay.
of articles before she came out.
Sunrise.
I don't know. Marky B. Thomas being like, I think she can do it and all this, and I'm gonna support her before she gets in like a muscle for it. And then she kind of comes out with him after she's done it, because she was about to announce his support, but then all of a sudden he's gonna cancel that.
Oh, KBLA.
Distance herself away.
He's come a long
And the other
way.
thing too is
Back to that day, I said to him, socks working.
shit.
And I think he's.
Yeah.
A lot of folks are great.
Oh,
Terrible.
she couldn't even really make it up by the VP name.
Right.
Provided, so why?
No.
I mean, for me, like, I'd say, she didn't make the VP,
That's all.
I'm like, you got pink hair, you're a black woman, Kamala Harris is more of that, like, she feels checks that Democratic box for the
I think
Oh, yeah.
89 is going to be interesting. I think Curran's a big trip.
So.
But I don't love the one who's putting in trouble. And for when she was a year ago, like when she first got in, I mean, I donated, I went to several of her things. That she
Yeah,
did.
she could have, you know, had her people coming down on, this is now who ended up doing the Nugent, you know, and all that stuff, still people's homes and stuff like that. We got like over 1,000 more cases like this. And then later on, oh, guess what? He donated to your campaign. And she's like, supposed to. Sure.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Before they get started,
That's okay. So that's been a bummer.
yeah, that's a lot of surprises. Huh?
Yeah. You get a cookie? Because Scott ate one in front of you, now you gotta have one. Oh, did you mind keeping this week?
You said 4 o'clock start.
He can't be mayor.
No, you're married, you're always late.
No, I'm exactly on time.
There you are.
I pride myself on being on time.
Yeah.
Too. It's a different time zone, but it's on time.
All right, so you have it's automatic.
Yep. It's fine. We're circulating on this.
Going on to the budget side.
Oh, that's why they were being so nasty. I was outside.
Lots of my friends got kicked out today.
Oh, I was there earlier. I think the budget was there.
Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Benay Defru, and I'm a PhD student in Material Science and Engineering. And I'm the president of the Science Policy Group at UCLA. And this is Kayla Lynn, who will be moderating with me. She's in the Molecular, Cellular, and Integrative Physiology program. And the Science Policy Group is a group of nonpartisan group of over 300 undergraduate and graduate students and postgraduate scholars. We are interested in the intersection of science, policy, communication, and society. If you'd like to know more about our group, speak to us after, and our information, we can share our information in social media and whatnot. We're very grateful and excited today to have Craig Greavy with us, Alex Grunenfelder, Pina Viola, and Mel Wilson, and taking time out of their same schedules to speak with us tonight. So just a quick note, there are a lot of resources out there about these candidates and their views, and this evening is not a comprehensive overview, and we're not going to be talking about all the crucial issues. We're just going to touch on the issues that we think can be influenced or most helped improved by science. So this is not necessarily a debate. It's not meant to be contentious. It's casual. And we are scientists and grad students, and we just want to learn from candidates how they view the role of the mayor and how they can incorporate science, data, scientific literature, and scientists into their process. So we can just get started right away. If each of you could give just maybe a 2-minute opening statement, and we'll just start right here about your campaign.
Yes, hello, my name is Alex Grunenfelder-Smith. I'm a community organizer, an Echo Park neighborhood councilman, a social justice advocate, and I'm running for mayor of Los Angeles because it's time that we bring new progressive leadership to City Hall, and we bring a new generation of leadership to City Hall. I've been in this race for a little over a year now because I saw a complete lack of fact-based progressive solutions to the issues that we're facing here in the city of Los Angeles. One of the reasons I'm so glad to be participating in this forum today is because I believe it's so important that we actually bring the facts and the science into when we address issues like homelessness, like crime, like public safety. We shouldn't be having these discussions from a place of pure rhetoric. We should be having them from a perspective of the facts. My policies have been clear and steadfast since the very beginning. I believe that ending homelessness happens by investing in social services, in housing, in drug and addiction rehabilitation, and investing in mental health care. These are the fact-based scientific approaches. I have been one of the strongest and most unequivocal supporters of climate justice at City Hall. We need to make sure that our city's Green New Deal happens in record time. And I have taken the approach of the science and the facts in regard to crime. Crime is a major issue for Angelenos here in the city of Los Angeles, but we cannot tackle it with the same failed tough on crime policies that we have seen not work in our city for decades. So you can learn more about me and my approaches at mayoralex.com and on social media at mayoralexla, and I look forward to all of your questions today.
I guess that makes me. My name is Craig Greavy, and like my friends here, I am running for mayor, but I am running after 20 years of experience in private enterprise, where my job was to solve some of the most intractable and seemingly impossible crises and problems that companies face, companies and individuals, everybody from Verizon and MasterCard to the late Kobe Bryant. If you had an impossible problem or you had resources that were in competition for each other and everybody was in disarray and nothing was going the right way, it was my job to come in and bring a solution. It was my job to devise that solution and to execute that solution. I never had the advantage of having my name on the side of a building so that people would take my orders. I had to do it based on the power of my ideas. And so when I entered this race, after digesting 200,000 pages of research and materials and doing over 2,000 meetings and interviews with community groups and individuals, I did so as the only candidate to enter with comprehensive plans in every single issue that written, published plans in every single issue that this city faces. I'm a nerd at heart, and that comes from that. But my perspective is one of common ground and common sense. My least favorite and favorite thing is the constant trolling on social media of, are you a Republican, are you a Democrat? Because we keep talking about the wrong things. When we're talking about party, we're not talking about people. As a candidate, I am talking solely about policy and people. What are the end results that we need to achieve, and what are the policies that get us there? Every part of my administration's plans will be built on that fundamental principle. Where are we going, and how do we get there? That direction, that leadership has been missing from this city for decades, and I'm proud to be running on a campaign to restore it. You can learn more about my campaign at craigformayor.com or craigformayorla on all social media outlets. Thank you for having us.
Sit on. Hello. Yes, thank you for hosting this. It's a pleasure to be here, and we weren't considered for many other debates, so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that it's important that all folks who qualify for ballots get invited to forums and debates like this, so thank you for that.
And show up.
And Sheila. My name is Gina Viola, and I'm running for mayor of Los Angeles. I'm the mother of 2 public school children, a business owner the last 25 years, and a community activist and organizer. And my activist life is what has brought me to this moment of running for mayor. I was asked by progressive leaders in the city to run for mayor when it became clear that our ideals and things we've been working on the last several years were not being represented by the candidates that the LA Times would have you believe are the only ones running. I didn't know about my fellow candidates here early on in the race, but at that point I jumped in on the last day at the last hour to run for mayor. So I've actually been building my campaign in the midst of GOTV time, so it's been quite a wild ride. But we are running a campaign of transparency and integrity and looking to root out the cultural betrayal that we've all been living with here in the city. You know, the political betrayal that we've been suffering. We have several city council members that are in jail or on their way to jail, and that's come at great cost to all of us, right? Our lives have all been impacted by that. We have 64,000 people sleeping on our streets, and it's not because we don't have the money to house them. We don't have the political will to house them. And as I've started running for mayor, I've been digging into policy, and we don't even have the policy to house them, quite frankly. So I'm excited to be in this race. I'm excited to be here today, and thank you all for showing up.
Good afternoon. I'm Mel Wilson, and I want to thank you, Bruins, for inviting us here in your house. We do appreciate it. I appreciate it particularly because a month ago, there was a debate on the campus of a Cal State University system, and they would have you believe that there were only 5 candidates that are running for mayor of Los Angeles. And it was so corrupt is that they prohibited the students. The students could not even sit in the auditorium to hear the candidates that the establishment has already identified as the likely mayor of Los Angeles City. So I thank you for not buying into that old establishment game. I'm a CSUN business grad, an All-American football player. I played briefly in the NFL. And I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, a community called Pacoima. I was raised by my single mother and my grandmother. And over the years, I have given back countless hours of time volunteering in the community. My bride, Bessie, and I have been married June 16th. Mark it on your calendar. Send us a shout. June 16th will be 49 years. And that's pretty amazing. I never knew my father. She never knew her father. So you can break the curse if you find somebody who loves you and you love back. And we've done that consistently for nearly half a century. So in other words, I'm old. But I have new ideas. I have fresh ideas. I have been trusted by 3 different mayors, Democrat and Republican. I'm not a partisan. I'm a Democrat, but I'm a pro-business Democrat. And I believe that the main things that I'm fighting for today throughout this campaign really is, one, to make our city safe. We know that there's a lot of violent crimes going on, but we also know that we need to have accountability. Accountability for the police officers, accountability for people who are breaking the laws too. The second most important thing for me really is to frankly make housing affordable. That's my wheelhouse. I've been in the housing industry for 40 years. I've been the advocate for a large real estate housing industry or trade organization for 30 years. And my primary business has been working with first-time buyers, people like you who are trying to figure it out. And you know, what I see is a lot of young people who they graduate, they get their bachelor's, they go back and get their master's. Some are like you are working on their PhD, and they're still living at home with their parents. Not their dream. I have a plan. I've done it before. I can show you how to buy a house or condo or be able to get on your own space with only 1% down payment. Pretty amazing in today's world when housing is so expensive. So that's important to me. Business is important to me. Our city is not business friendly, and I know that we can be much better off. I want to eliminate the LA City's gross business tax. Next thing is really investing in you, young people. I invest in young people. I hire, in my plan, we'll hire 75,000 young persons part-time while they're going to school full-time. And we will pay them a bonus for just finishing the semester. So we're not even going to grade you on your GPA. We're just going to say, you finished the job for that semester, you get a bonus pay.
Sorry
So
to interrupt, but we have a bunch of questions.
Okay, sure. So finally, you know, my initiative really for climate is I know our climate is horrible here, that we have the dirtiest air in the nation, and I have plans specifically to do something about that. Thank you. Thank you, Danae.
So thank you so much for those opening statements. A few of you mentioned housing and homelessness in your openings, and as Gina mentioned, there are over 60,000 people experiencing homelessness in LA. Is the #1 issue for voters. So regarding a recent occurrence, recent UCLA research followed unhoused people after last year's displacement at Echo Park Lake. The mayor and members of city council say these sweeps were and continue to be justified because of the promise of stable permanent housing. But UCLA researchers found that less than 10% of these unhoused residents of the park were actually housed afterwards, and others were simply displaced. And city officials continue to clear encampments under Municipal Code 4118, which prohibits sitting, lying, and sleeping on any street, sidewalk, or other public way when there is insufficient long-term housing for those displaced. Another team of researchers from various California universities recently showed that these forced relocations and property seizures strip people of health necessities, drive people into hazardous and isolated, less visible spaces, and exacerbate health problems. So our question is, as mayor, how would you reconcile the difference between what the evidence says and the current enforcement of 4118 around the city? And maybe we'll start in the middle here with Clay.
All right, let's do this. 4118 is a disastrous law no matter what side of the issue you stand on. If you're progressive and you, or let's just take the extreme. Let's say that you believe that anyone should be able to camp anywhere, you hate the law. And if you are in favor of finding solutions, actual real solutions to homelessness, 4118 is also a disastrous law because it's just poorly written and nearly impossible to enforce and doesn't achieve anything. It is, like most LA city policies, a Band-Aid in the wrong place. It's like seeing somebody with a gunshot wound and putting a Band-Aid on their foot. The reality is that homelessness, the dirty little secret of Los Angeles is that homelessness is being eradicated across America. Full stop, period. That's worth repeating. Homelessness is ending across this country. just not in California, in particular San Francisco and Los Angeles. In fact, 98 cities in America are moving towards functional zero homelessness. 14 municipalities have already achieved it. North, south, east, or west, there is a concrete program for how to reduce and eliminate moving to functional zero homelessness. My plan is the only plan that is built on that evidence and fact-based success. Can't get much more factual than 14 cities at functional zero homelessness. And so the reality is that these short-term solutions, where we're just putting Band-Aids on a foot for a bullet wound to the chest, don't accomplish anything. You have to have a comprehensive solution that moves quickly. We know that you need real-time data of who's homeless, where they are, and what they need at any given time and what's available, which we don't have. The point-in-time count is a glorified duck, goose game. You're homeless, you live in Silver Lake. It doesn't make any sense. You need real-time data. You need to stop homelessness from starting in the first place. 24/7 hotline to prevent homelessness, which is proven to be 95% more cost-effective, while also preventing the long-term mental health and addiction issues that happen when you get on the street. It's on average $200 to keep somebody in their home and $2 million to get them off the street. Let's just take a look at those decisions. The city's making $2 million mistakes every day instead of $200 solutions. And then third is housing the people that we already have on the street. You can't just do random encampment sweeps and push people around on a chessboard. You have to have a comprehensive program, which is why my program is designed to get more than 50% of people off the streets in under 9 months, while ensuring that we have categorization for each of those individuals based on their need. They're housed and serviced according to their needs, and it's housing and services together at the same time as a comprehensive solution. You can.
We're gonna try to keep our
Yep.
responses to like 2 minutes.
Okay. So let's talk about 4118. 4118 is cruel and unusual banishment and punishment. It's been found to be unconstitutional twice now. So why did the city bring it back? Let's talk about that first. Because our city is invested in criminalizing poverty. And this is something that needs to change. I would absolutely take steps to get rid of 4118 immediately. 4118 is being utilized to fill jails and prisons with poor people. That's the dirty little secret. We have a prison industrial complex here in the state of California that needs to be fed. And we are a city that is leading the way on decarceration. We've been very successful here in the county and city at offering alternatives to incarceration, right? So the jails have been getting emptied out, the prisons have been getting emptied out. 4118, make no mistake about it, is going to be used to fill those jails and fill those prisons. And it's banishment, it's cruel, it's loss of bodily agency, right? When we decide humans can't sit, lie, or sleep somewhere, and we physically remove them, forcibly remove them with state-sanctioned violence, that's deciding we don't have agency over our body. So we can't be surprised when the Supreme Court decides we don't have a right to have an abortion, because we're giving up our bodily agency. So it's important that we strike down 4118 right away.
Thank you. I have a basic premise. I believe that housing is a basic human right. That's what I believe. And I've been fighting for this for 4 decades. I do not believe that you have a basic human right to live on the streets. I think it's inhumane to allow folks who've been living and dying on the streets of LA. It's a very complex set of problems, but it's solvable. We know that there's probably 60,000 or more folks who are homeless living on the streets. Here's my plan. My plan 1 is you ask 4 questions. Who are the homeless? How do they become homeless? How long have they been homeless? Where did they come from? And then we assess who they are, and we give them the treatment that is appropriate for whatever their needs are. We know that mental illness is a big problem, and we give them mental health care. We know that drug abuse is a huge problem. We know that incarcerated people who are formerly incarcerated are let out on the streets without any way of surviving. So we have to help them. But you have to provide the housing first before you kick people off the streets. It's just not humane to push people around. I was in Venice last week, and the sheriff and some other folks pushed a bunch of homeless neighbors from the boardwalk, and they all went to Centennial Park. They didn't provide housing for them. They just pushed them around. I think that is patently wrong. It's inhumane and undignified. So we can solve this problem. My plan is to take industrial buildings, convert them, We could do it in 6 months or less. I'm a real estate expert. I have a master's degree in commercial real estate, and my thesis is on how do you create housing for middle-income workers and millennials in LA. So I know how to solve this problem. It's being done in our region. It's not being done in LA. So we can do this much more affordably. We can do it faster. And this is the solution that I have in place. All you need to do is go to melformayor.com and help me get there. Thank you.
As someone who's actually a member of the Echo Park Neighborhood Council, I can speak very directly to what happened in Echo Park Lake. What we saw in Echo Park Lake is exactly the kind of thing that our politicians in Los Angeles like to do. When the press is around, they do things that are big, sweeping, drastic changes that make you feel like the crisis is over. When the press goes away, and believe me, the press did go away, my council member directed the arrests of multiple journalists at Echo Park Lake that night, we don't actually see results. I was at a briefing the day that the results were released by the scholars here at UCLA. I believe it's very important to actually be meeting with people in the academic and scholarly communities to make sure that the results that we're getting are based on the latest facts from researchers. But all of this has reflected what I've been saying since the beginning of my campaign, and that's that a multifaceted approach is necessary. I've talked to people at all sides of the spectrum when it comes to the issue of homelessness. I've talked to folks who hold the housing first approach. I've talked to their opponents. And at the end of the day, we know what's going to work is we need to end street homelessness by providing people a place to sleep tonight. And then we need to invest in more temporary transitional housing as well as permanent supportive housing. This will not happen overnight. And anyone who tells you that they're going to be able to solve this crisis in the next 6 months is lying to you. We have begun to tolerate in Los Angeles politicians routinely lying to you, and they do not lie to you by omission. They do not lie to you slightly. They blatantly and intentionally lie to you. What we need to do is we need to invest in the housing resources here in the city of Los Angeles to get the job done. We need to invest in drug and addiction treatment, and we need to invest in mental health care. This is the fiscally responsible solution. This is the compassionate solution, and it's the solution that's actually going to lead to eradicating homelessness here in the city of Los Angeles, and doing so in a way that's fighting for those who are housed and unhoused alike.
Thank you all so much for your responses. I'll pass over to Gila.
Yeah, so the next question, we're gonna pivot a little, and it pertains to the topic of climate resilience. So extreme heat causes more deaths in the United States than all other weather-related causes combined. And green infrastructure is something that plays a major role in providing climate resilience capacity and has been shown to reduce the urban heat island effect, increasing thermal comfort, and can also decrease surface runoff as well as improve microclimates. And while the people of Los Angeles will all experience climate change, the severity of that impact is shaped by the neighborhood variables, including proximity to ocean breeze, tree cover, as well as exposure to pollutants. For example, locations near the ocean can be 10 to 20 degrees cooler than inland, like when you're in Santa Monica versus in the valley, and urban heat islands can be up to 12 degrees warmer than shaded areas. And these variables are also largely influenced by wealth, race, as well as age. Given the additional dilemma with the current drought and water use limitations, how do you see the mayor's role in working to strengthen climate resilience for all LA residents? And specifically, what is something you think that the mayoral office is currently doing that you want to continue, or something that you would like to introduce to enhance climate resilience?
Okay, thank you. So I'm pleased to have the endorsement of the Youth Climate Strike as well as Sunrise Movement LA. I have signed both their pledges. One is to implement the Green New Deal Los Angeles Sunrise Movement, and then also the Healthy Streets LA Streets for All 25 by 25. We absolutely need to move away from car dependence on this city and limit the traffic. We have to remove traffic lanes and grow green cover, boulevards, right? Walking boulevards, we need protected bike lanes. If we move away from fossil fuels entirely, we will have a cooler atmosphere for sure. So it's imperative that we take steps today. Right now there are plans to sunset the fossil fuel drilling, 5 years, 10 years. We don't have those years to wait. We need to abolish fossil fuel drilling on day one. Also, all you need to do is drive across the city to see the inequities, the environmental racism that exists here. Watts 86% of the drinking water in Watts has lead in it. That would never be acceptable on the west side. If that was the case here in Westwood, that would be fixed overnight. So again, it's not a matter of scarcity, it's a matter of political will. We have the money to do it. We need to allocate the funds in the right direction to get it done. And we need to do that on day one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. You know, last month we celebrated Earth Day, Earth Month. I think we should be Earth Year. We should celebrate it every year. We should do something about it. Two of my biggest supporting groups, which I started out asking early on, are Native Americans. There are two main Native American tribes in our region. There is the Gabrielinos Tonga tribe, and there is the Fernandino Tatavian tribe. Both of them have endorsed me. They know about preserving our earth. Here are some of my concrete plans to do this. Number one, I want to eliminate greenhouse gases. My goal is to cut it 50% during the first 4 years of my administration. 50% greenhouse gases. And how do we do it? We have to focus on the generators. Generators are almost 90% is transportation. So I was on the Metro Board 2 different terms. When I was on the Metro Board the first time, what we did is we got rid of all the diesel buses, got rid of all the methanol buses. We converted them to low emission fuels. I want to go further. We need to eliminate all the fossil fuel uses of buses, trains, and we target cars, trains, buses, boats, ships, and planes. All of those things. We can do this as mayor. I have influence over the Metro Board, which owns all the buses. As mayor, we own 200 buses in the city of LA. We can convert all the fleets to zero emission fuels. And I'm not going to say it has to be electric, because hydrogen is another option too, and their fuel cells is another option, but zero emissions is where we have to go. We can actually get this done. It costs a little bit more. We did it when I was on the Metro Board before. We just have to have a will to do it, because it's cheaper to do it now than to not have a planet for all of you when you graduate. Thank you.
You know, I was born and raised in a rent-controlled duplex without air conditioning, so I care very much about heat in working class parts of our city. The fact of the matter is, the city of Los Angeles is getting hotter, and it's happening because of climate change. In an immediate sense, we can do things like developing more shade canopies for our public transit infrastructure. As someone who's the only candidate in this race who doesn't own a car, who takes public transit most everywhere he goes, I've personally gotten heat exhaustion from days waiting for the bus without shade. That's something we can do in the immediate sense. We can invest in shade infrastructure, we can invest in other type of infrastructure to keep people safe and cool during summers. But long term, we're going to have to invest in real climate solutions that are going to make sure that we have fewer droughts going into the future, that we handle those droughts in the future, and that we lower the temperatures in our communities. That's going to mean investing in more clean, green public transit. It's going to mean getting our city on a 100% renewable grid. And it's going to mean adopting the city's Green New Deal plan, not by 2035, which is what Eric Garcetti has proposed under our current leadership, and which we have not actually set in motion any plans to achieve, but getting it done by 2030, starting on day one, by abolishing fossil fuel drilling, by making sure public transit is not powered by fossil fuels, and by making sure that the climate groups that are so crucial to the way in which we get things done when it comes to climate change, that these groups have an open door at City Hall. Fossil fuel lobbyists, natural gas lobbyists, have had an open door to the mayor for a long time. And scientists and activists haven't been getting into City Hall. So it's folks like you who are actually doing that work, trying to advocate for science-based climate policies. You're going to be an important part of the administration, and that's something we need to be doing from day one.
God bless, I love a question written by a scientist. There's like 19 questions in there. I was a French major, we had no such luxury. Listen, there truly are like 19 questions in there, but I'm gonna start by just trying to break this down into just the common sense of it all, right? Which is, you hear from a lot of candidates, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. And with all due respect to those proposals, what are we setting out to achieve? What is the end goal here? Because, yeah, sure, like let's make sure all of our buses are zero emission. How much is that going to drive down emissions in a city of 3.9 million and a county of 10 million where most people are still in their cars? Let's talk about the fact that we want to get people off the roads. But with all due respect to our public transportation infrastructure, which is just, frankly, how do I say this without using the F word? Fuckery. And so the answer on that is you have to build a city where people can live, work, and play in the same area. That's how you get cars off the road. You build a city where people can live, work, and play together. When you build a more affordable city, and I'm the only candidate with a written, concrete plan for housing affordability on my website, you bring traffic down by 30%. But what's your end goal? Is it emissions? Okay, well then let's aggressively invest in things like hempcrete, moving away from concrete. We're still using the same building materials from 150 years ago because there's been no incentive to move to new materials. But hempcrete is a concrete sink. It's actually stronger than concrete, grows stronger over time. There are all kinds of options, but what's the end goal? The end goal is to reduce emissions. Pick our biggest emissions and switch, right? Where do you make the biggest impact with the smallest, fastest move? 4% of buildings are 50% of emissions. Okay, so let's focus on those 4%, and we can deal with the buses as an easy solution on the side, right? The same is true if it's water, right? Okay, so this conservation component drives me nuts. We talk about domestic conservation, but over 85% of our water usage in California goes to fuel 70% of America's fruits and vegetables, and that's not going away anytime soon. Domestic water conservation makes us all feel good, but it's virtue signaling. The reality is aggressively investing in environmentally friendly desalination and recycling will drive water, but what's our goal? Is it more water? Is it more shade cover? Is it reduced emissions? Then we can break down each of those questions, and I've done injustice to all of them by hitting on them very quickly in what is now just slightly over 2 minutes, I'm sure. But the reality is, what is the end goal? Drive to the end goal. Let's stop virtue signaling. Let's stop saying things that sound nice to everybody, and let's do the work and determine what work we need to do that's going to move us forward fastest towards the actual goals we want to achieve, whether it's shade cover, climate mitigation, water, whatever it is, but find the individual goal and drive towards it.
Thank you. Thank you all for your answers. And now we'll be talking about a related topic of energy and environmental justice. So earlier this year, Governor Gavin Newsom established a science-based 3,200-foot setback distance for new oil and gas operations for sensitive locations like homes and schools. Over 350,000 Californians live within 600 feet of an unplugged oil or gas well, which can leak toxic fumes, contaminate water sources, and contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Paired with the fact that oil and gas wells are disproportionately located in low socioeconomic and largely non-white communities, such an oil field located near downtown LA that contains 800 idle wells. This problem not only represents an issue of general environmental health, but critically an issue of environmental justice and discrimination. As mayor, how would you approach well plugging efforts and other aspects of environmental justice throughout LA? And as a follow-up, how would you contribute to the transformation of LA's energy sector to meet the city's climate and energy targets?
Perhaps we can start with on the end.
Thank you. So environmental justice is really important to me. I grew up in Pacoima, and Pacoima is a community that they have a lot of freeways intersecting. When I was a kid, they tore up our neighborhoods and put freeways in there, and then they had the nerve to call it the Ronald Reagan freeway. So it was really kind of a slap in our face. As kids, we couldn't ride around our bikes anymore because the freeways cut us off. So as mayor, I will focus, as I said earlier, environmental justice is something that's critically important. Reducing greenhouse gases 50%, it's measurable, and I have a plan to do it. Target the ships, target the planes. Can't do so much about the planes, but the buses and the cars. We can get this done. So I have a plan to actually do something about it. DWP, the city actually owns it. It's the Department of Water and Power. I will offer discounted rates for charging for anyone who has a car that's registered in the city of Los Angeles. This will incentivize people to use electric vehicles instead of fossil fuel vehicles. So there are a number of measures that we can do. As a mayor on the Metro board, we can change all the bus systems around. When I was on the Metro board the last time, I asked Mayor Villaraigosa to do something, and he agreed to do it. And that was, we started doing what is called transit-oriented communities. When you look at that up, TOC, look it up in the planning department, that's Mel Wilson. Mel Wilson introduced the idea, we put together the private sector, the public sector. We all came up with initiatives on creating about 170 tactics of building housing along transit corridors. It used to be we built them along, just around the stations. So things like that will cause what they call job housing balance. We'll get people to actually live close to where they work, and they can walk, and walkability will become a major index that we'll use to identify people to use it. So these are strategies that we can actually do, and we do it to create housing affordability, because right now there's no housing affordability in our city, particularly in the communities of color.
Or, yeah, I guess we'll just do
Okay.
that.
So shame on Gavin Newsom. Shame on Gavin Newsom. Like we know we need to come off of our dependence of fossil fuels. We know we need to stop oil drilling entirely. And the reason we don't is because the Democratic Party is beholden to big oil. Big oil is still what's in the room calling the shots. Our campaign is not like that. We are only beholden to the folks who donate to us $24 at a time. We're taking no fossil fuel money, no big oil money, no Democratic money. And this is what sets us apart from the other candidates running, is that we can abolish fossil fuel drilling on day one, because we are not answering to those big oil players anymore. That's who's had the seat at the table. That's who's deciding how long we're gonna have to put up with this for. But if we decide to go another way, if we decide we're gonna pick a candidate that isn't beholden to any of those entities and can make big decisions on day one, despite what Gavin Newsom wants, we can actually start to make some real change. And that's something we're gonna need to do. And we're gonna have to switch to wind and solar right away. We have huge wind farms and solar farms out in the desert. So we'll have to start with that while we are looking into hydrogen and other forms. You know, we don't want to switch one bad thing for another, right? So it's imperative that we reach out to the indigenous community that knows how to do this, that we reach out to folks like scientists who know how to do this. But we absolutely have to abolish fossil fuel drilling entirely.
Oh gosh, I don't think anyone should emulate Gavin Newsom in any respect, but that's just a personal opinion. So we can take that shame in a lot of directions. But going back to the question, I think you had a question about, it was the oil caps, right? And then it's sort of the overall environmental justice around this, right? And I want to zero in on that question. We have lots of things that are not little things, but there are lots of individual things around LA that I call ticking time bombs. The oil wells and the capping and the use is one of them. Our use of fossil fuels, our refusal as a country to invest in nuclear as a result of the 3 Mile Island incident, even though it's incredibly safe and yes, has long-term deleterious effects in smaller numbers and everything, we're choosing between bad and worse, right? Like we're using energy, right? So there's no good place that energy comes from. Just ask anyone what happens to a windmill when it's taken apart and can't be recycled, right? So we're choosing between bad and worse options. And we're trying to get to the less bad as we innovate with science to get to the best option. But we've got to keep an eye out for these ticking time bombs that affect our marginalized communities most. Oil wells, oil caps are one of them. I'm surprised that we haven't, and no one ever actually brings up water and pipes. So I'm going to bring up when you ask the second part of that question, what would you do? For anyone who's not aware, y'all should be aware when there was a huge break here at UCLA 10 years ago, 90% of the pipes in Los Angeles are over 80 years old and in imminent danger of breaking. And the vast majority of the worst pipes are in the most marginalized community, which means in case of an earthquake, 50% of Los Angeles becomes unlivable overnight with no water in and no sewage out of most of the residences of the city. So that's a $28 billion problem. So yeah, sure, let's deal with the oil caps and let's deal with the oil wells. And I would like to transition away from fossil fuels. I'll take a slower approach because I want to preserve the jobs and I want to have some place to go when we do that. But let's also focus on the fact that we just aren't honest about the crises that we face as a city because we just keep playing distraction every time. We create offices, we create, as Alex rightfully pointed out, a climate plan that has not taken one step forward in any respect. So yes, we need to address these components. You need to decrease dependency, you need to address. I don't think there's a clear answer from the community about what we can do about discarded oil wells and how we can protect the communities around them effectively, right? That's the real question in this is what is the best solution now and how do you build towards the better solution? The same is true in your energy usage, the same is true, and I'm gonna take pipes up as our water infrastructure and our sewage infrastructure as a mayor. It's not glamorous, but it's sure as hell not glamorous when it's in the middle of your living room after an earthquake either. So those are the ways in which I move this forward, because the reality is that in each of these areas, the poorest communities suffer the most and get the help the last. So if we don't solve them, we're gonna be looking at crises of unprecedented proportions that you cannot solve.
You know, my campaign was the first one that refused to take money from oil and natural gas. We remain the only campaign to do so for most of the months of the race. We were the first campaign to pledge to end oil drilling on day one in the city of Los Angeles. This is a policy I continue to support. But the fact of the matter is, and this is a thing that a lot of my fellow candidates, both here today and not here today, seem to forget, is that the mayor of Los Angeles is not the dictator of Los Angeles. The powers that we have are limited by the city council and by the state government. I have problems with many of Governor Newsom's plans. However, I think that this one that we are discussing was a step in the right direction. It did not go far enough. What we need to do is we need to work with the state government, because it will require that, to phase out these oil wells, both the ones that are currently being used and the ones that we need to cap that are already polluting in the communities, despite the fact that they're not actually being used for anything. We need to work with the state government to do that. We need to work with the city council and elect progressive, strong climate justice leaders, not just to our position as mayor of Los Angeles, but to the city council, to the state assembly, to the state senate. It's going to take a broad, comprehensive approach, as many of these issues do. Because I think it's easy to say, we're going to phase out oil drilling and it'll be done. The fact of the matter is, I think we need to stop drilling for oil in the city of Los Angeles. But if there's someone else on the other side of the county whose home is now going to be rendered unlivable by pollution because of the fact that we're now just taking our oil from over there, that's not really better for any of our fellow Americans. So we need to transition to clean, renewable energy with the help of actually bringing scientists and activists to City Hall. We need to phase out our drilling in the city of Los Angeles and move toward that Green New Deal. And we need to work with the state government to actually cap these oil wells and make sure that they cannot harm anyone anymore.
Thank you all for your responses to that question. We're going to be switching gears again a little bit, and the next question pertains to crime and public safety. We actually had DA George Gascon in this room for a similar discussion before he was elected to the DA's office, and he won on an evidence-based platform of restorative justice, largely focused on reducing the prosecution of low-level misdemeanors. But he's now facing a recall effort, as I'm sure you all know. So support for his recall in this mayoral election has been sort of a proxy for wanting a tougher on crime approach, despite the fact that California police data shows that tough on crime counties like Sacramento experience higher crime rates than places like San Francisco and Los Angeles. Could you each talk a bit about your understanding of crime and public safety in LA and how that will be reflected in your budgeting priorities? And and follow up to that, what challenges to implementing these policies do you envision in LA?
And we'll start with Gina. I started on the end with
Okay, sure. So I'm the infamous defund the police candidate running. But there's a second part to that. It's refund the people, right? So what makes communities safe? Resources. Healthy, resourced communities are safe communities. And sadly, that's not the history we're living in Los Angeles. What's happened in Los Angeles is communities have been divested from for decades and replaced with policing, over-police, surveillance. This is what's keeping us from being safe. Because when any community goes without its basic needs being met, none of us can be safe, right? So George Gascon is taking the right approach. He truly is. He's on par with what the county has voted for over and over again. We voted in 2020 before George Floyd was murdered. We voted for Measure R as a county, 73%. And we said we didn't want to build new jails. We didn't want $3.5 billion spent on building 2 new jails. We wanted alternatives to incarceration, and we wanted oversight of the sheriff. Then, in November of 2021, we put dollars, annual dollars to Measure R, Measure J. Again, saying you need to fund those alternatives to incarceration. So our city has already said we no longer want jail as a solution to our social problems. We recognize that that has not been making us safe. That has not been keeping us well. What I know about policing in this city, I know because I've been sitting in the Board of Police Commission meetings for the last 5 years, every Tuesday, before they went on Zoom. So what I know about the LAPD, I know from the LAPD directly. And after about a year of sitting in those meetings, I realized that the LAPD can't even control the racism in the room of the Board of Police Commissioners. It's certainly not controlling it out in the streets. The LAPD's budget has grown 52% in the last 10 years. No other line item in our city's budget has done that. And where has it left us? It's left us with communities that don't have enough to thrive. And as mayor, one of the biggest responsibilities that we have is presenting the budget. And it's shameful today that City Council went ahead and voted almost unanimously for an 8% increase to the LAPD's budget, even though last year they had a 150% increase in police killings. And who are they killing? They're killing Black, brown, and poor people in our city. We lead the country in police killings, followed only by our sheriff's department. They are number 1 and 2 each year. I worry that they compete for that spot. So budgets are a moral document, and where we choose to spend our funds says a lot about who we are, and we need to move away from it being a police state. And we can do that with our dollars and cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you go this way? Yeah.
So I'm a common sense centrist here in the fact that I'm just going to be honest about where we put our dollars and where things go, right? We keep talking about crime as if it's some singular entity, and then on the other side, we talk about reinvestment in communities, that sort of thing. But we're not addressing the fact you got to walk and chew gum at the same time. Regardless of historical highs and lows, people have to feel safe. If they don't, they leave. LA lost population for the first time in its history last year for a variety of reasons. We do that 3 years in a row. We enter an economic death spiral. We have to address where our policing is going. 34% of police time at a minimum is spent dealing with homelessness, which is equivalent to removing 3,000 officers off the street overnight. What do you think happens when you remove a third of the police force from policing? Then we ask the police to show up to everything, even places where they don't want to be. Every fender bender, every mental health call, we're stretching everything's too thin. Then on top of that, 30% of the city's budget, when we've done the math, goes towards 60,000 homeless people to achieve nothing. It'd be one thing if we were working towards a solution, but that's $3 billion a year that is not being invested in communities, that is not being invested in affordability. All of these things come down to one simple fundamental question, which is the budget. How are we spending money and where is it going? The city's budget is 30% bigger than it was 10 years ago, which means taxes are up and the population is roughly the same. Think about that. What are we paying more for? Where is the money going? What are you paying more for? Can you afford to live here when you graduate? The reality is that crime and policing is just one element of this entire budgetary exercise. And yes, I do fully support fully funding an effective police department that is focused on police work, while also fully funding a nonviolent community engagement force. Ripping funds out from one to partially fund another just puts two people, two organizations, two groups of people in the world of war with each other. But the reality is these solutions already exist. In 2015, the Obama Department of Justice put out a report that showed how to reduce bias, reduce crime, and build stronger and build stronger relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve. And we've enacted 0 of those policies. This is more of the nonsense. This is why I decry one of the candidates who's not here when she talks about writing a bill that was never passed, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, because there was no need for that bill. There was already a roadmap on how to do it that didn't require any new federal laws. That was done years before. We're ignoring the fact that we can move forward, but you've got to move forward on each of these items together while building common ground. And I respect the deeply held and beliefs of everybody on this issue, but if you begin your mayoral administration by starting a war with half the city, as George Gascon has done, that's just poor leadership, regardless of whether you agree with the policy. We've had decades of poor leadership. We need somebody whose focus and experience and track record is building consensus to drive results forward. And I'm the only candidate in the race that has done that for large, complex, multi-billion-dollar organizations based on the power of my ideas alone. And that's where our focus on crime, the solutions exist, right? Removing them from the homeless response, fully funding a nonviolent community engagement force, allocating that $3 billion a year in community investment. All of those solutions exist, but you've got to take them as a comprehensive component. To say, well, we're just going to be tough on crime, it's just shouting to who? Doesn't actually achieve anything. It's a slogan. It's like when the other candidates who aren't here talk about adding police officers. Newsflash, we actually can't even fill the positions we have open, so ain't nobody adding any police officers anytime soon. Let's just be honest with the people.
You know, I volunteered for George Gascon's campaign for the district attorney. I was a big supporter of those fact-based solutions to crime. I have spoken to both sides of this issue repeatedly, the experts that are cited by both sides. And again, we know that these approaches do work. We are going through an increase in crime for a lot of complex reasons. But as you pointed out, these are increases we're seeing everywhere, including in places like Sacramento, where the district attorney of Sacramento is now trying to bring her policies of being extremely tough on crime to the office of the attorney general. These policies don't work. We know these policies don't work. We know criminal justice reform is necessary. We also know, as my fellow candidate, Ms. Viola, pointed out, that the LAPD's budget right now is too high. We are putting a lot of that money into increasingly militarizing our police here in the city of Los Angeles. We're having a discussion about defunding or not defunding the police, when what we are really talking about is a proxy battle over whether or not we are militarizing or demilitarizing the police. We need to take a small amount of the LAPD's budget and invest that into the services our communities desperately need. When there is a call to the police about someone having a mental health crisis on the street, the police are not trained to handle it. When someone is having a drug overdose, there is no reason to send 3 squad cars to deal with it. I know this firsthand. Again, I have lived near what was one of LA's most infamous encampments at Echo Park Lake. The fact of the matter is criminal justice reform policies are working, but they take time. We are going to need to make investments into the services that keep our communities safe, and therefore take things away from the police, take away them having to handle mental health crisis calls, having to handle minor misdemeanors, clogging the courts up with someone who shoplifted food, and making sure our courts are clogged while we are having an increase in violent crime in this city. This is not the way to handle things. I oppose strongly the recall of District Attorney George Gascon. I support the work that we are doing at a city level and at a state level under individuals like our current California Attorney General to tackle this issue. And I support reallocating a small amount of the LAPD's budget toward the social services that are actually going to make our communities safer. That's what the facts say, that's what the science says, and I'm tired of tough on crime rhetoric in the year 2022 somehow thinking it's better than the science.
Thank you. I traveled all over this city, nearly every zip code over the last 10 months. I was in Watts a couple weeks ago, San Pedro, San Fernando Valley, West Adams, Jefferson Park, Westchester. And here's what's common in all those communities. People are telling me they just don't feel safe. They don't. I asked people who ride the metro. Yesterday I was meeting with a number of metro people, mostly bus operators, bus drivers. They said their biggest concern is they don't feel safe as bus drivers. Think about it. You're going to ride public transit. Do you feel safe? The survey shows, and this is fact-based, you can go take a look at Metro, metro.org, or actually metro.net. Take a look at that, and they'll show you surveys that they've conducted that women particularly do not feel safe using the system. So we have to really get real. I'm African American. I grew up in a low-income community. The police were pretty oppressive at the time, and they are in many other areas. You ask yourself, who's being incarcerated? at the highest levels, black and browns. But they only, blacks make up less than 10% of the population in this state. But they make up close to 40% of the population in the prisons and the jails and the youth authorities. So there's something wrong with this. There's a disconnect. I believe that we need to start at the beginning, which is investing in our kids, investing in youth early, investing in childcare so we don't have latchkey situations where kids are unsupervised at home. Parents cannot even afford to have childcare these days. So my budget really invests in these things. It invests in our children, it invests in families. I'm a middle-class based guy. And I was dirt poor when I grew up, and I worked my way into the middle class. So regarding policing and accountability, I think people need to be held accountable. When I was a kid and I messed up, my grandma held me accountable. Somebody snatches your purse, do you not think they should be held accountable? How comfortable do you feel walking in an unlighted area on your campus here? Ask yourself. So we need to invest in public safety. It's not just policing. It's also what's causing these problems. We have the lack of income. So some people feel desperate that they have to go steal and do things so that they can survive. So we have to invest in higher paying jobs, we have to do those kind of things. But to say that we're not going to invest in our police and not invest in mental health experts, my plan hires 350 new mental health experts to go along with the police at times when they're needed, but also to help young people who are stressing out over, am I going to pass my finals? Am I going to get my dissertation done or not? They're talking about committing suicide, and we've heard about it many times over. So it's not just crime with respect to policing, but we have to look at the holistic view of how do we have public safety. And so I support more police officers. I support holding them accountable. Most cops don't turn in cops. We have to start holding them accountable. With respect to George Gascon, I voted for him. But frankly, I'm disappointed that I did, because I'll tell you a personal story. I'm a Sunday school teacher at my school. I have two kids, Tommy and Tammy. Their brother was murdered with a gunshot wound. The young people who did it, 16, 17 years old, they're going to get out of jail. They caught them. They had the weapon on them. George Gascon said, I cannot prosecute them as adults, even though they killed my friend Tony Jr. with a gun. Tony Jr. is gone. He's 20 years old. He'll never get older. And so that's why, I feel that, we have to have prosecutors, police officers who don't just have a boilerplate. I don't do this, I don't do it. They need to look at each case individually. In that case, my family members are hurting. My kids in my Sunday school class are hurting. So think about it, you need to hold people accountable. You're held accountable, and it's called your grade. You don't do your work, you don't get the grade. So I believe that we need to do all this, but we need to invest holistically, not just in cops. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your answers. So this is our final question before we potentially open it up to questions from the audience. And this one is about trust in scientists.
About what?
This is about trust in scientists.
Oh, sure.
And if you have any questions, we'll get to them after this. So our group primarily consists of scientists. So, and the mayor so I want to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic. So the mayor has an important role in declaring local emergencies and coordinating the city's response, as we see during this pandemic. And these decisions require ongoing conversations with experts in various fields. Los Angeles County is home to several renowned research centers such as UCLA, USC, and Caltech. These research centers have an abundance of experts in STEM policy issues ranging from pandemics to wildfires to substance abuse and a whole range of other topics. So what do you see as the current avenue of communication between the scientists and the mayoral office, and what would these relationships look like if you were to take office?
Sorry, I'll do it this one. Sorry. Yeah, I'll just go down.
I think it's really important to look at how our mayor has treated scientists and how our mayor has treated the community at large. The fact of the matter is, Mayor Eric Garcetti has been out of commission for much of his most recent term because he's been trying to court a position in the Biden administration. He has not been here physically a lot of the time. And at the end of the day, he's probably not going to get appointed to the ambassador position that he's been seeking this entire time. When we talk about the relationship between the mayor's office and scientists, that's an easy question to answer. We need policy discussions to have the scientists and the experts who know the facts and the science. They need to be in the room more. That's something I can always promise. When the mayor makes appointments, and the mayor makes hundreds of appointments directly, many of them without city council approval, we need to be bringing more scientists into City Hall to handle these topics. There's no reason that we should have people who don't have degrees studying substance abuse. There's no reason people like that should be handling and carrying out our addiction treatment programs. There's no reason that people who haven't been at places like UCLA studying homelessness should be carrying out our homelessness policy. That's the easy part. What the COVID-19 pandemic has shown, though, is that there is a big gap between the general public and scientists. So, trust in science is at historic lows. We need to bridge that gap. One of the things that is in the mayor's power isn't even just the direct power, but it's that platform that you have. It's that ability to draw attention to issues. It's the ability to get the press to cover you. We need scientists on the forefront of these issues. It shouldn't just be the mayor talking about their ideas and their plans. It should be the researchers who have helped to get them there, who are there on the front lines with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring scientists and researchers into City Hall, and I'm going to try to work with them to help repair the gap we have in trust in scientists between City Hall and the general public.
I do love science, mostly because it leads you to concrete answers, right? And fun questions and all those things. But the reality is that we've got to acknowledge that science and public policy needs to be built on science, but it also has to understand the limitations of science with the public. Why is there historically low trust in science at the moment? It's a problem of our own making. I know this because friends of mine have been at the forefront of the COVID-19 response on a national and a local level, and we just simply lied to the public from the beginning. Politicians wanted to project an air of certainty, and so they said, stay home for 3 weeks and everything will be okay. And then when everything wasn't okay, you lost all credibility. That's not what we knew was going to happen at every step of the way, and we could have been honest locally. Instead of Garcetti standing behind a podium as a patsy for the board of supervisors who have appointed the head of public health who doesn't have a single public health credential, tells you how much we value science. We have somebody projecting certainty when we could have said, listen, we don't know what this virus is. It's gonna get bad. We're gonna tell you some things to do that we think are gonna keep you safe. If you don't do them, you will probably have a greater chance of dying. And as soon as we know more, we'll come back to you. If we'd just been honest with people from the beginning, we could have built a relationship. It's not that people have a lack of trust in science, it's that people have a lack of trust in the people who are talking about science. Because we have put policymakers and politicians at the front with the freedom to roam and to lie as they please. It tells you everything you need to know about our priorities, that in the middle of the greatest health crisis of our lifetimes, of the last 100 years, the LA City Health Commission had a budget of $0. Think about that. The LA City Health Commission had a budget of $0, and always has. Science must form an integral part of how we move forward, but we also need to acknowledge that we have to be honest with the public if we're going to build a bridge between scientists and the public, between the science and action, and acknowledge the limitations. I don't support a vaccine or a mask mandate, regardless of what the science says. We know that higher vaccination rates will keep us healthier, safer. Why don't I support it? Because we've lost all credibility. Good luck enforcing it, folks. Go to the airport anytime recently and you will see mass civil disobedience because we ask people to wear airports and a mask and then take them off in a plane. And everyone says to you for exactly what that is. Lunacy in one respect or the other. Pick a policy and stick with it. So we've got to acknowledge the limitations of our failures. And while we may make the smartest possible, strongest scientific decisions, we've got to make the smartest possible, strongest scientific decisions that will move society forward, that will build trust and protect us to the best extent possible
That was a lot.
I don't think that's a lot.
So, yeah, we absolutely need to listen to scientists. And the reason that we don't listen to scientists is because capitalists don't want us to listen to scientists, right? If there's not money to be made, if you're threatening the ability for capitalists to make money, they will silence scientists. And this is something, I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I absolutely would want to work with scientists. And Craig referenced the Health Commission in the city of Los Angeles, and he's right, there's no budget on it. And I don't even know if there are any scientists on that commission. There are, okay.
Some, but not all.
Not enough. Yeah, that's who I want to hear from when something happens, right? With COVID-19, I wanted to hear from the scientists. I didn't want to just hear from the county's mouthpiece or from Garcetti, quite frankly. I wanted to hear from scientists. And it was really troubling to me that that's not who we were hearing from every evening, right? So we had to rely on the county health commissioner. And like you said, the city doesn't have a health department at all. We just have a very weak health commission that doesn't do much. But the bigger problem is, the COVID relief dollars that came down, more than half went to the LAPD. And 10 LAPD died from COVID. So the folks who were tasked to protect and serve us didn't even take COVID seriously. It's the leading cause of death for law enforcement this year across the country is COVID-19. We stopped contact tracing here because I'm sure it all led back to law enforcement. So we absolutely need to meaningfully partner with science in a major way.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you all, your scientists. You guys are the brilliance of our society and the future that we all hope to have. And I just hope you keep fighting to make sure we tell the truth. When I started out this campaign many months ago, I made a commitment to myself. Number one, I'm going to tell the truth. Number two, I'm going to have fun. And number three, I'm going to engage the voters. And that's what I stuck to. With respect to science, we look at COVID-19. I've been vaccinated twice. I've had a booster. But I don't believe that you should require people to get vaccinated. I just don't think it's our right to tell people to do what they don't want to do with their bodies. I had COVID-19 a few weeks back, even though I've been vaccinated twice and I had a booster. So, I believe that this whole election is going to come down to who do you trust? Do you trust a billionaire to do what's right for you? Do you trust career politicians who've been in office for 10, 15, 20, 30 years to make things better, make things different? Who do you trust? Or do you trust people who really are out on the foot, on the ground, meeting and engaging with young people, older people, voters, non-voters, and the like? And I trust science. That's why I got vaccinated. I trust it. But that doesn't mean that you should have to do it just because I trust it. With respect to the city has the highest business tax in the land. I served on the Business Tax Commission for 4 years. We figured out how we could get rid of the city's business tax scientifically. We figured out how to do it and create more good paying jobs so that you, when you graduate, you'll be able to stay here and live in Venice or wherever you want to live, But our mayor Garcetti, decided he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. And so if he had done it, we would have many more jobs created here that are paying really good wages here. So my plan is to get rid of the business tax because I know it's science-based. So I look at you, we do research, I'm a deep reader. I'm 69 years old, but I went back to school 6 years ago and I got my master's degree. I got my master's degree in commercial real estate, and as I said earlier, I wanted to figure out why is housing so expensive in LA? And I figured it out. Scientifically, how do you get this done? I have a plan to do it. Go to my website, melformayor.com. The 4 is a digit 4, melformayor.com. I'm a common sense, no nonsense guy who will just tell you the truth and have fun with you. You know, we'll have a great time together as mayor. What I want to do is appoint you, young people, to my commission, to the police commission, to the fire department, to all these other departments that we have. Get young people who are smart, like you guys are, involved in making the decisions that impact us all. And so I will trust you to do the right thing. And I need you to trust me to get elected so that I can help you. Thank you so much. Mel Wilson, Mayor of Los Angeles.
Thank you all so much for your answers to our questions. So we would just like to open up to the floor. If there's anyone in the audience that has a question they would like to ask, there is a microphone in front of everyone. And so you can hit the little button that looks like a mouse. Oh, yeah, you got it.
Oh,
and
wow.
go ahead.
All right, thank you, everyone. I wanted to circle back on the topic of housing crisis. Either it's because it's very unaffordable right now, and also the homelessness. All of you have touched upon the idea of how to address homelessness by building more housing and stuff like that. But the crucial fact is that 70-something%, 76 or something like that, percent of all of LA is zoned for single-family housing, right? And so without, rezoning the whole city, where will you even find the space to build those new homes, right? That require law changes, zoning code change.
Oh, I love this.
Well, as I said, I'm the housing expert. And here's what we do. As I said, I pushed forward, the city adopted a policy to build housing along transit corridors. And so we have land that we can build higher, more density, less parking, along transit corridors. As you may notice that there are a lot of commercial buildings, you just walk around the community, you see a lot of places that are closed down. We can take these commercial properties, we can build housing there. My plan is very scientific. How do we get there? The city of Los Angeles charges $60,000 per unit to build before you can even break ground. What I would do is I would waive those fees. I would defer those fees in exchange for the builder building so that you can afford to live there. They're not going to do it because it's a good thing to do. They're only going to do it because it's economically good for them. So we give them the carrot. The carrot is we waive the fees, we defer the fees for them building housing that's affordable for every price point, for every age bracket out there. So we do these kind of things. The planning process is very convoluted in LA City. So what we have to do is we have to fund the planning department so that the planning process can go quicker. Because right now things get stuck on someone's desk for weeks and weeks upon a time, and it adds up to be years. And now you have the lack of housing affordability. And our biggest challenge here is LA. The median price house is over $1 million. That's crazy. You cannot afford that coming out of college. Even if you have a PhD, you can't afford it. So what I will do is I will focus on the housing element so that we can create housing that's affordable so that you can stay here and not move to Nashville or Denver or Austin or some other place.
Sure. So 20th century US housing policy is deeply baked in racism. Okay, it's created for white wealth building while extracting wealth from Black people in particular and people of color in general. And this is something that needs to be addressed before we do anything. Because no matter what we decide to do, how we decide to revamp affordable housing, how we decide to rezone to build, if we don't grapple with the policy itself being designed the way it is for redlining, for gentrification, we won't get anywhere. We won't move anywhere. So as Mel said, there are plenty of properties. There's plenty of vacant properties in Los Angeles. One of the things we have to do immediately is a vacancy tax. Councilmember Bonin put forth a vacancy tax at the beginning of the pandemic, and they shelved it for 2 years. 2 years during a pandemic. So that's one of the first things we need to look at. And SB 9 from the state is coming down, right? So zoning is going to change in Los Angeles, whether we want it to or not. So these are things we have to grapple with, but the first thing we have to grapple with is the fact that the policy itself, the housing policy, is baked in racism. And the other issue that we have is 75% of our rental stock is now big landlord and corporate owned. So we need strong tenant protections immediately, because we're gonna see our houses population explode. People are on the brink of eviction each month, every month. I've talked to families in the valley that live 2 to 3 families in an apartment with all of the adults working 60 hours a week, and they are barely making it. They're making 90% of what they're paying goes to the rent. So these are things we need to address before, and building, but building is down the pike. I mean, there's many other things we can do to start to control the housing crisis here in the city.
So it is often fun for advocates of one position or another to cite statistics like the fact that we have so much single-family home zoning, but I'll cite some different statistics in this vein, which is that we know that 70% of Angelenos struggle to make their rent every month and choose between food and rent or some other life essential. We know that we've only built 13% of our housing stock in the last 30 years, which means we're not building for people who lived here in 1992, let alone 2022. We know that our zoning code, yes, was written in 1946 under very racist terminology and times, and hasn't been changed since. We are still building according to the rules of 1946. This is all lunacy. We must build, and the only way out of a housing crisis and a housing affordability crisis, which, by the way, homelessness is a separate issue. Just ask the 3.9 million people who aren't homeless, who feel like this city is too expensive in housing and affordability. The only way out of a housing affordability crisis is with clear, scientifically data-based, fact-based policy with an updated zoning code. We've been rezoning LA for 10 years and haven't rolled out a single new line of code. By not creating a war, I'm the only candidate who will pledge to preserve single-family home zones and neighborhoods and communities, and making sure that people aren't priced out of them, while building all the capacity we need, because lo and behold, if you look at the data, it's possible, right? Not only building along transit corridors, but converting latent fallow industrial land into mixed-use development. And you can do it using market incentives. And you know how I know this? Because I've literally sat down with 5 different companies who told me that if the city gets out of the way, without even waiving the $60,000 fee, if the city gets out of the way and actually approves things and allows them to move forward, for example, in the conversion of latent industrial zones into mixed-use development, these 5 companies alone can construct 500,000 units, affordable units, over the next 10 years, which is what we need to create the actual economic definition of a housing market where supply and demand have a rational relationship. We get to a point where no one has to pay more than 30% of their income in their rent, and where people can afford to buy homes, and where we create a natural ebb and flow between single-family homes and apartments and city centers. That's how an economic market is supposed to work. Let's use the market. But they can't do that. They can do it at $225,000 a unit in construction costs, right? And that's without the government getting involved, and still turn a profit. The reality is, we know that it's possible to update the old adage, build, baby, build, baby, build, but ethically and responsibly and quickly. Because the only way out of this problem, without creating more problems, is we cannot start slapping policies on top of it. Well, we're going to control this, we're going to put a cap on this, we're going to put this. Look at what the eviction moratorium did to property owners. What about the small mom and pops who owned the apartment building that still have to pay the mortgage? You go to the state mortgage website and it says, sorry, we know you still have to pay your mortgage even though you're not getting rent. What? Regardless of the corporations, what about the mom and pops who are still in that vein? The reality is, we have got to stop slapping band-aids everywhere and focus on an actual plan. And the problem is that the city has no plan. The last 4 mayors have had no plan. Everyone else running in this race has some form of, I say I have a plan, I don't have a plan. I'm the only person with a written, published plan built with 200 stakeholders, from general contractors all the way to the Democratic Socialists of America, across the spectrum, and I got everybody to agree on 99% of the same plan. That is consensus building. That is leadership. That is what you should vote on, is an actual plan to ensure that you can afford to live here. That's how we move forward.
I think when we talk about this issue, we do need to be talking about single-family zoning. And I think that we do need to be talking about rezoning the city of Los Angeles and the state of California. SB 9 and the related legislation that was proposed and passed by Governor Gavin Newsom was a start. It was an important start. But like much of what we talk about or what the state government has done, it is not enough. And the fact of the matter is we did create single-family zoning from the perspective of historic racism and classism. That is still embedded in what it is. It is a politically expedient answer to say, I'm going to solve the problem without doing anything to your single-family homes, because it makes the wealthier folks on the west side and in the valley feel better. But the fact of the matter is that it's just going to increase the amount of pollution from building that we are putting into low-income and marginalized communities. It is going to put the brunt of the homelessness crisis on the backs of working-class people in the city of Los Angeles. And at the end of the day, it is inevitably going to fail. We, for some reason in the city right now, where a real estate billionaire is the front runner, have convinced ourselves that real estate developers have no incentive to lie to you about how much they're going to make off of your tax dollars. Real estate companies and real estate interests are not incentivized to lower your costs. They are incentivized to make money. So when we talk about this, we need to be bringing in the scientists, we need to be bringing in the policy analysts, we need to be bringing in the activists, and we need to abolish single-family zoning here in the state of California. We need to build a lot more, and we need to make sure that the renters who are currently in the city of Los Angeles are protected, whether they are being evicted or whether they're just living in their homes trying to avoid drastic rent increases.
Thank you so much for your responses. Unfortunately, we do not have time for any additional audience questions. However, each candidate can go ahead and give a approximately 1.5 minute closing statement. We can maybe start from, I guess we'll start from this side.
Once again, my name is Alex Grunenfelder Smith. I am the youngest mayoral candidate in the history of our city. I'm a UC grad. I'm a social justice advocate. I'm an Echo Park neighborhood councilman, and I'm a supporter of real, comprehensive, progressive leadership. We cannot solve the issues that we are facing here in the city of Los Angeles if we do not discuss them in a fact-based, scientific way. From day one, and of the folks who are sitting here today, I've been in the race the longest. From day one, I have issued my plans very specifically on what we're going to do. We're going to build more housing, and we're going to make sure that everyone has the ability to be in affordable, permanent supportive housing. We're going to make sure that the folks who are living on the streets have the services they need, and that we invest in the critical infrastructure, whether around the environment, public transit, or many of the other areas that are important to Angelenos, that they have the investments we need without putting more money toward things like the LAPD. I've also signed off since very early in my campaign. We don't take corporate money, we don't take PAC money, we don't take fossil fuel money, we don't take natural gas money, we do not take police union money, and I think I probably got them all there. But the fact of the matter is we are not taking special interest money in this race. It is time that special interests do not control the city of Los Angeles anymore. That you, the people of Los Angeles, control the city of Los Angeles. So if you're interested in bringing a new generation of bold, young, progressive leadership to City Hall, go to mayoralex.com or at mayoralexla on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I hope to have your vote in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for putting together this forum. And thank you all for taking time out. And for those watching online, my name is Craig Grivey at craigformayor.com and Craig for Mayor LA on social media outlets. You've heard me say it time and again in this forum, but I'm going to level with you here. I am the type of practical optimist that only I can be. You know, I grew up enmeshed in poverty and abandoned at the age of 14, so finding a way out was seemingly impossible. And finding a way out of the city's crisis is seemingly impossible, but it is possible. That has been my job for the last 20 years, is finding solutions to seemingly impossible problems. But you can't do that with stars in your eyes about how you want to remake the world in 4 years, or how you're just going to instantly make everyone swallow sunshine and rainbows. You can't do it by putting yourself at war with half of the population in a city by trying to attempt to put through a policy that you can't build consensus around. I'm the only candidate who's going to come at this from an optimistic but realistic point of view. Common sense, common ground. Where can we build together? We can get to the parts we disagree with later, but let's start where we agree and build out from there. And I'm the only candidate who started with that approach and is finishing with that approach, with actual written, published, vetted plans in homelessness, affordability, crime, corruption, veterans, jobs and innovation. We go on. You get the point. We gotta be level set about what's possible and what's not. Now, it can be incredibly hard, but we've got to build common ground to achieve hard things. And that's not going to take hard and fast ideology. It's going to take understanding, compromise, and consensus, which is what I've done my entire life. It's what multi-billion-dollar companies trusted me to do that are 10 times the size of Los Angeles. And it's what I will do as mayor. So thank you. Visit craigformayor.com, and I hope to have you support your vote. And thank you again for having us.
Thank you.
So I'm Gina Viola, GinaForLA.com, at Gina for LA on socials. And the time for pragmatism is over. It's time for imagination. It's time to think about new ways of being in community with one another. And that starts with the budget. And I am the People's Budget of Los Angeles candidate. And if you haven't already gone to the peoplesbudgetla.com/survey and completed the survey, please do so now. You know, one of the things that we're going to do is have participatory budgeting sessions in each of the city council districts, but also at places like UCLA. We'll come together for a full day to have interactive discussion about how you want your city's budget dollars spent. Because right now, the cookie cutter budget that's put before us each year comes at a great cost. And I would argue we are already at war. We're at war with the poor in this city. And that has to stop. And the way we've kept that war going is by criminalizing Black, brown, and poor people in this city. Divesting from those communities, keeping them under-resourced so that we don't feel safe. Feeling safe comes from being well. Right? When communities are resourced, when communities are healthy, communities are safe. When you drive across this town, you can feel it. There's a tremendous difference between the parks in Watts and the parks on the west side, the school sites in Watts, the school sites on the west side. That's horribly inequitable, and it's keeping us all from feeling safe because people among us are not safe because they're not being properly resourced. So I am the candidate that is looking to change things and shake things up overnight. And I want to build consensus with community and people out on the street who've been divested from and left behind. Thank you. And thank you for having us. And also I want to point out in all the forums, I love listening to these candidates. This is something new and fresh. We may not agree. In fact, most of us, we don't agree on a lot, quite frankly. But it is refreshing to me to hear something different. You know, Kevin De Leon tells the same story every time he's on stage, right?
Karen Bass, sisters, one more time, I'm going to kill.
Karen Bass gives you a recap of her life. You know, the other candidates running.
A crisis.
Well, the other candidates running have been in office, governing over this city to some degree from some seat. And we're in a big mess. So why would we continue with those policies that we know already do not work? So what you heard here today is wildly different and new and refreshing, and it's a pleasure to be among you and listen to all of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, UCLA policy group, I thank you. Kayla, I thank you. Vinay, I thank you. And all of you here, I thank you for allowing me to be here on your campus. I'm just a middle-class guy. Started out poor, didn't like being poor, so I went to school, got an education, and it really was a opening for me to be able to give back to a community that I love. I started out in Pacoima, and the city I love, the city of Los Angeles. Out of all the candidates on the ballot, there are 12 of us. I'm the only one that's been trusted by 3 different mayors, Democrats and Republicans. I'm the only one that all the Native Americans are supporting. There's a reason. I believe in equity. I believe in efficiency. And as mayor, my top priority, frankly, is going to make our city safe. Here's what I know when I talk to young people. They're telling me they're stressed out. They're telling me they're frustrated because they cannot go to the beaches. Venice. It's hard to go to Venice now. It's hard to go to the local parks. It's hard to just walk around your campus or off your campus and feel safe. So we know we need to have our community safer, and that starts with accountable community policing. But it also hires young people like you to be a part of that public safety network. It's not just hiring cops. It's hiring mental health experts who will help you and will intercede with you when you're going through a stress level that you just cannot bear anymore. My plan offers free mental health care. So you can call in and get an appointment. Right now, we know it's very difficult to do that. We know it is. So I go to where the people are. My plan really is going to focus on housing affordability, not just owning, but having an apartment that you can rent, having your own private space. You deserve it. My plan makes business friendly so that when companies are thinking about coming to LA, they'll have a reason to want to come to LA. For companies that are in LA, they'll want to stay in LA. And I believe in creating good paying jobs, green jobs. I believe in doing all the kind of things that you as scientists can do really well for us. You are our future. I will include you in my administration. I love fresh ideas. I love ideas altogether. And we don't have to agree together. We can still be friends. I like these guys. I like hanging out with them. Even though our policies may be a different way of how we're going to govern, I believe that we all have a right to speak and that we should respect each other no matter what our differences are. And so that's where I come from. I want to help young people, investing in them, and a part of my budget. And the climate, we know our climate is changing. The reality is that we can actually do something about it. And that's why I'm going to engage young people and have you as a part of my administration to make sure that we are not just going with the old paradigm, that we have new ways that are scientifically based solutions for getting our city to be a great city again. We have the capacity to do it. The diversity here is amazing. By the way, I'm a foodie. And so I'm waiting for you to invite me to eat with you because I'm ready to go. I mean, I just love great foods and we have it all around here in the city. It's great. But because it's not so safe, it's hard for you to want to go out to hang out. And I'm going to change that as your mayor. So I thank you. My name is Mel Wilson. My website is melformayor.com. Take a look at it. It's common sense stuff that actually works. I bring people together. And I would love to have you support me through voting. Here's the bottom line. The establishment feels like you are not going to vote at all. They are counting you out. You, young people, will make the difference in this election. So cast your vote. The ballots are already out. So go in. Number 11 on the ballot, Mel Wilson. Thank you very much.
Number 11?
Yes, I am.
Thank you so much, each and every one of you, and thank you to everyone here for attending and being politically engaged. And don't forget to vote by June 7th. And thank you to I don't know why I'm looking up, the David School of Medicine for this beautiful room, and the National Science Policy Network for funding, as well as members of the Science Policy Group for helping to put this together. And most importantly, thank you to all the candidates for an insightful and exciting night, and for prioritizing students and science.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we often
I include art, photos, I noticed you're taking photos. Would you be willing to like offer a photo?
Yes.
Would you email or do you
Yeah, I can get, when do you need them?
I don't have a publication.
Okay, yeah, I have to do a lot of stuff for publication tomorrow.
Oh, okay, no,
But
no.
I can like edit photos and stuff on Friday.
Yeah, I was gonna try to end the